Feeling uncomfortable? Someone giving you the ick?
Yes, as a matter of fact, you are.
Don't stand for it. Report it to 101.
I might just do that. Anything else?
Unwanted attention, receiving it is never okay. Don't hesitate to call us on 101.
Hang on, I'm giving him unwanted attention on here. Better be careful.
Someone watching you? Pika, don't. It's okay. We will deal with them. Don't hesitate to call us on 101. These are all genuine slogans promoted by Humberside Police, encouraging members of the public to call in the heavy squad on the basis that they don't like how somebody looked at them in the street. Yet another bid by the police service to prioritise non-crime and offence taking in the interests of the rapacious lust they have for social media memes and criminalising bad manners.
Is all that really true? Let's watch a bit more.
Needless to say, these police-made offences are so widely drawn that it's for the complaining public to decide whether or not an offence has been committed and on what terms.
This is from Crimebodge, a YouTube channel. His content does include some pretty worrying examples of police officers abusing innocent members of the public. But he has an agenda. His agenda is anti-police, and this influences his comment and analysis. It's only fair that we look at this content critically and ask whether what he's saying here is true. This is important because it's healthy to look at things sceptically, otherwise you run the risk of being manipulated. As I keep saying, I don't particularly like the police either, but that's my private opinion. Nobody cares about my private opinion. I'm not important enough. As an aside to this, I should add that Humberside Police, who Crimebodge are discussing here, Humberside Police are one of the worst police forces in the country, my private opinion. Even their own officers, however, jokingly call themselves Blunderside Police. But despite my dislike of the police, I don't have an agenda against the police, other than simply telling the truth as I see it. That's what guides me. I think it's very small and petty to allow your dislike of somebody or something to influence how you look at facts. I think we should stick to facts. Against that standard, let's look at the claims being made here by Crimebodge.
So I sent an FOI request to Humberside Police and asked them how giving someone the ick amounts to a criminal offence under English law. Their response? A criminal offence is established after the report of an incident or contact with a victim. Well, this is news to me, as I'm sure it is to everyone who's tried to elicit a police response for offences actually recognised under law that the police have no interest in dealing with.
I don't see his point, with respect. First of all, the response from Humberside Police is accurate. It is true, it is literally true, that a crime is established after it is reported. What else do you expect to happen? Unless they witness the crime themselves, the police aren't psychics, which is just as well. Of course, Crimebodge hasn't shown us the full reply from the police, nor has he linked to his own Freedom of Information request in the video description, which would have been helpful. So we can't see the response in context, but what he read out from Humberside Police is perfectly accurate as far as it goes. It is true, as the police state, that a criminal offence is established after the report of an incident or contact with a victim. But the sentence requires interpretation. We have to interpret it in police speak. For bureaucratic purposes, a criminal offence or crime, in police speak, is whatever is reported, and the person making the report is a victim. What Crimebodge is trying to suggest is that the police think a crime is established by a report rather than a report being the initiation of an investigative process. Note that the sentence says after, not by. If you substitute the word by for after, then the statement does become objectionable. As it is, the author of that statement is using a colloquialism, saying after to mean a sense of not just after something occurs, but also the beginning of a process, so that a report of an offence is the beginning of a process of investigation. The only strong objection I would have with the language used is that, strictly speaking, it's not a victim, it's a complainant. That's more than a linguistic quibble, it's a serious objection. A complainant only becomes a victim at the point when the allegation is proved, which is much later following a fair trial. Anyway, the point is that this is just the internal bureaucratic speak of the police. I agree that the language used should be more precise, but it's not meant to imply what Crimebodge seems to think it does. In contrast to the police statement, here's what Crimebodge thinks should happen.
Well, this is news to me, as I'm sure it is to everyone who's tried to elicit a police response for offences actually recognised under law.
Actually, that statement from Crimebodge is entirely consistent with the police statement that you see here. I think the real issue for Crimebodge is what he says immediately after that.
That the police have no interest in dealing with, which is most of them.
He has a beef with the police. He doesn't like them. Well, join the club.
But here we have it. Just by reporting something you don't like, it's automatically graded as a criminal offence.
That's not true. First, he's using the wrong terminology, I think. Grading refers to incident grading, which is normally undertaken by police call handlers. I may be mistaken, but I think this is still governed by the ACPO National Call Handling Standards, which I believe are still current and have been adopted by the College of Policing as a successor body. And those standards allow call handlers to grade incidents as either emergency or non-emergency, and non-emergency incidents have further graded responses which include priority, scheduled and resolution without deployment. What Crimebodge is talking about is whether something should be classed as a crime or not.
Which would require recording it, adding it to the crime statistics, and issuing the victim with a crime reference number. And presumably some sort of investigation would follow.
In bureaucratic terms, police officers involved in responding to incidents will decide if they think a crime has taken place. That's not because the police are acting with prejudice in the sense of prejudging something and denying somebody a fair trial. It's purely for reasons of efficiency because of the nature of their duties. The decision can be changed. They're not lawyers or law professors. More pertinently, they're not detectives. They're responding to the incident, not investigating it, though they will take steps to help the investigation by preserving the scene and making arrests to preserve evidence and whatnot. But they can't be stood around a dead body, for instance, debating whether or not it's murder and the finer points of concurrence and mens rea. They will just designate it as a crime for the purpose of formal reporting at that point, and then hand things over to whoever investigates it. If it turns out not to be a crime, and at least the evidence was preserved so that a fair and impartial investigation could establish this. But Crimebodge is saying that incidents can be automatically graded as crimes, by which I think he means that the police automatically categorise it as a crime. That's not the case. I think he is conflating three different things. The first thread to this is the way that the police record or count incidents. That is governed by whatever is the local policy of the force, which in turn is influenced by the Home Office crime reporting rules for frontline officers and staff, which includes rules about how crime is counted. The relevant section of these rules says this: an incident will be recorded as a crime, notifiable offence, for victim-related offences if, on the balance of probability, A. The circumstances of the victim's report amount to a crime defined by law. The police will determine this based on their knowledge of the law and the counting rules. And B. There is no credible evidence to the contrary immediately available. A belief by the victim or person reasonably assumed to be acting on behalf of the victim that a crime has occurred is usually sufficient to justify its recording. Crime defined by law means a crime which is determined to be notifiable. Notifiable crimes do not cover all criminal offences, as most summary offences are not notifiable. This clearly refers to crimes and is clearly for the purpose of policy. The idea is that every force is collating and passing on data about serious incidents so that the government, lawmakers, civil servants, chief police officers, academics, people like that, can build up a picture of how much crime there is and where resources should be going. It doesn't follow that every incident locally reported in this way is a crime, or that every so-called non-crime reported involves something other than innocent conduct. It's a general picture whether the data is collated for local purposes or national. The reason it's not recorded more accurately is that it would not be efficient to do so, and also it would raise the objection that just because the police decide to take no further action in the matter, that does not mean that a crime has not taken place. The second thread to this is the way that the police record incidents against a person's name. This was addressed in the Miller case, where it was argued that the police should not be able to ask the Disclosure and Barring Service to record a so-called non-crime hate incident against a person's name, or indeed record that as such in their own records. I agree with that complaint. I think this is where the police have the most potential to abuse innocent people, and also guilty people, by poisoning their name and reputation using secret records, but I will go into that in another video. The third thread to this is how the police handle investigations. Sometimes the police will pursue something as a crime that isn't, or that turns out not to be, or they will treat something as a non-crime even though it's innocent behaviour. Again, the reason for this is to do with investigative efficiency. None of this is an automatic process. It's down to the discretion of the response officer or whoever is dealing with it, and depends on an assessment of the available evidence. Unless something is so obviously a crime that no further deliberation is necessary, it's clearly the case that some sort of intelligent input has to go into it. It's just that the input is abbreviated. It has to be because the police need to move the process along. Also, it's important to bear in mind that the police are not just concerned with crime. In fact, the prevention and detection of crime, while very important, isn't even the first or most fundamental duty of the police. The police have a broader duty to keep the king's peace, which translates to keeping social peace and looking to ordinary people to help them keep the peace by behaving themselves. And the police also have a broader duty to keep order. These broader duties can involve being asked to give advice or admonishments to people for behaviour that is wrong but not criminal. It's part of their role. I'm not convinced that Crimebodge and other anti-police people like him fully understand this. They seem to think that the police should only be concerned with crime per se. Not only is that incorrect, it is a fundamental misconception of the function of policing in this country and why we have police forces at all. To give the example, let's say some woman complains that Crimebodge is giving her the ick. I'm just joking. Let's say an attractive young woman thinks she's being followed by a strange man. That's what these slogans from Humberside police are really about. The police are not just going to rush in and arrest the man. They have to assess the situation. Obviously, unless they can identify the man, they have to rely on what the woman is telling them. They may give the woman some advice, such as taking a different route to work for a while. It could be that the man is completely innocent and it's all just a series of coincidences, and maybe the woman is building it all up in her mind with a bit of added convergence bias, perhaps due to previous experiences. It could even be that she's lying. It could be that the man really is following her because he has a sexual or romantic interest in her. This is not in itself illegal or in any way wrong, though it does depend on the context. In some contexts, it may be considered inappropriate behaviour. It becomes criminal stalking when following her around is unwanted and causes her to feel fear or distress, and if it persists despite counter-efforts or warnings. For an exact definition of stalking, we should look at the Prevention from Harassment Act, 1997. We'll start with subsection 8.3, which states this: harassment of a person includes causing the person alarm or distress, and the course of conduct must involve conduct on at least 2 occasions. Section 1.1 prohibits harassment. A person must not pursue a course of conduct A, which amounts to harassment of another, and B, which he knows or ought to know amounts to harassment of the other. Section 2A provides a definition for the offence of stalking. Basically, stalking is a type of harassment that involves specific behaviours that cause fear or distress to a victim but would fall short of a stricter definition of harassment. Subsection 2A.3 lists some examples of stalking. It includes behaviour such as following a person, contacting or attempting to contact a person by any means, publishing any statement or other material, relating or purporting to relate to that person or purporting to originate from a person, monitoring the use by a person of the internet, email or any other form of electronic communication, loitering in any place, whether public or private, interfering with any property in the possession of a person, watching or spying on a person. There is another type of stalking and offence of stalking under section 42A of the Criminal Justice and Police Act 2001, but that's stalking someone at their house, and we need not address that here in detail. Suffice it to say that subsection 42A1D defines this harassment offence as conduct that amounts to harassment of or causes alarm or distress to any person within or in the vicinity of a dwelling, even if it's not their own home, and is likely to result in the harassment of or to cause alarm or distress to any such person. We should also consider public order offences. Section 4 of the Public Order Act 1986 makes it an offence to intentionally put someone in fear of violence. Section 4A of the Public Order Act makes it an offence to intentionally cause someone harassment, alarm or distress, while Section 5 makes it an offence to behave in a disorderly manner likely to cause someone nearby harassment, alarm or distress. Why is all this relevant to what Crimebodge says? His argument goes like this.
Call me old-fashioned, but I always thought that getting the odd unwanted look off someone in public is just one of the inconveniences of living in a free society. But Humberside police have decided to pass it as a law, without any need for Parliament or any of those other petty democratic processes that get in the way of the police telling us what we can and cannot do.
That's not true. No new laws have been created. It's a campaign. The law already defines what stalking and harassment and public order offences are, as I've just shown you. And as I've just shown you, there is nothing in there about looking at somebody in the wrong way or giving somebody the ick. Clearly this poster issued by Humberside Police was stupid, but what I'm explaining is the reasoning behind it. The execution left a lot to be desired, but there was a reason for it. I've mentioned harassment and stalking. Other non-contact offences of a more sexual nature would include indecent exposure, which is an offence contrary to section 66 of the Sexual Offences Act 2003, voyeurism, an offence contrary to section 67, upskirting, an offence under section 67A, and cyber flashing, which are offences in sections 66A and 66B. None of those offences make any mention of giving somebody the ick or any of the other things in the Humberside Police posters highlighted by Crimebodge. The argument being put forward by Crimebodge is that these posters are an attempt at soft lawmaking by the police, in the sense of widening the interpretation of the statutory offences that I've mentioned and maybe other offences. But that's not the case. I don't accept the argument. None of these offences would be formed by any of the behaviours specified in the posters. So what's all this about? This video by Crimebodge ridicules the Humberside Police campaign, maybe rightly so, but he misses the context of it, the reasons for it, and overlooks an important nuance. The clue is in the images of the campaign. You'll see that there is a hashtag, Libby's campaign. He ignores this, so let me explain what that was about. In early 2019, Libby Squire, a student at the University of Hull, was raped and murdered by Pavel Relevich. Apparently, he had a history of spying on female students in Hull and committing indecent acts in the street. Given this background to his offending, Libby's mother, Lisa Squire, campaigned for the police to target low-level sex offenders in the hope of stopping them and helping them with therapeutic interventions before their crimes escalate. Let us also think back to the Sarah Everard case in 2021 and bear in mind that the culprit was committing lesser sexual offences before he committed kidnap and murder. All that explains this police campaign, because in order to identify these lesser offenders who are committing either lesser sexual offences and perhaps non-contact sexual offences of a type we've outlined in the statutes, The police need people to come forward and report suspicious or odd behaviour that may escalate into offending. I disagree with that. I don't think the police have any business speaking to somebody just because they find that person's behaviour socially odd. But I don't think that's the intention anyway, and the police are not making it an offence to give somebody the ick. The messaging is targeted at young women in a way they will understand, to reassure them that if they have concerns about somebody, they can approach the police. That's the purpose of these slogans. It doesn't mean the police will rush in and arrest an innocent man. It's just a way of opening a dialogue with young women to reassure them that their concerns will be taken seriously. Personally, I don't agree with it, but I think that is the explanation. I think Crimebodge misrepresents it.
You slip on the ice and fall over in the street. People look at you and laugh. That's unwanted attention. Receiving it is never okay. Call 101.
As I've demonstrated, that's not the intention behind it.
You come home loud and drunk at 3 o'clock in the morning. The neighbours are looking out the window at you. Peek don't. Call 101.
That's just silly. Admittedly, the slogan that Humberside police came up with is pretty stupid as well. But this man, Crimebodge, has his own agenda, which is anti-police. So what you have to understand about his channel is that he's looking for opportunities to badmouth the police and exaggerate things into a good story. Sometimes this will be justified, of course. But my question for Crimebodge and for his fans is this: does a biased perspective on things truly inform, or does it poison the well? Poisoning the well is an informal argumentative fallacy. In this case, it takes on the form of presenting an unfavourable and highly rhetorical interpretation of police actions in a way that prevents disagreement, so that any argument put forward in disagreement can be dismissed. We see the effect of this in the way that some supporters of auditors call me a bootlicker. That's the effect of channels like Crimebodge. It's evidence that the well has been poisoned. If you defend the police, it's assumed that you either are a police officer or you are unwarrantedly compliant or obsequious towards the police and authority figures generally. Another fallacy that his channel falls into, among several, is cherry-picking. He's rightly highlighting bad behaviour and incompetence from police officers. I have no issue with that, but he uses these examples as a basis to make sweeping generalisations about the state of policing in this country. Some of his general conclusions will be valid, some won't be, but the point is that he's making cherry-picked arguments. The overwhelming majority of interactions between police officers and law-abiding people are likely to be fairly uneventful. What his channel shows is a tiny number of incidents in which officers react wrongly or inappropriately and even abuse their powers. Let's face it, anybody can produce content that shows this. There are currently somewhere around 150,000 police officers in England and Wales, so there are going to be incidents going on every day of the week in which officers are abusive or incompetent or just mistaken about something. They're human beings like you and I, and we're all fallible.